exploded over 40 nuclear bombs into the atmosphere, Greenpeace set their sights and their sails on the French nuclear testing program. But could 4 people in one tiny sailboat really expect to have any effect?
David McTaggart.
It was the early summer of 1973, and we just finished sailing 3,600 miles to protest against the French testing of atmospheric nuclear weapons in Mururoa, which is 800 miles south of Tahiti. And we'd entered the zone, the cordon that they had set out, which was an illegal cordon, and we went through that and came just outside the 12-mile limit of Mururoa. It was amazing. The day we arrived, the balloon was in the air, we could see it, and they were getting ready to set off that bomb that day. They came at us with 3 warships and a vedette, and one of the vedettes had an inflatable behind it, a Zodiac with 7 or 8 men in it, and they came up alongside, and 3 of them jumped up on the side of the deck, and I went to the front one, the one in the middle, and told them, you know, not to get on my boat. We're in international waters, and they just let me have it.
McTaggart and his crew were badly beaten. Of course, the French government denied it, assured that their commandos had confiscated all film of the incident. However, they underestimated the people of Greenpeace. While the commandos weren't looking, one of the protesters hid this roll of film on her person. After these pictures were smuggled to the world press, the embarrassed French government agreed to stop all atmospheric testing of nuclear weapons. After helping to stop French atmospheric testing, Greenpeace continued to question the alternative chosen by the United States government. Is underground testing safe?
5.
Is it more dangerous because people assume it's safe? As the level of underground testing increased, Greenpeace activists decided to test a few levels of their own.
I think that's the place here. Is that here? Yeah. That's
The results were frightening. The activists discovered suspicious amounts of radiation leaking from the Nevada test site. Following the success of its Navy, Greenpeace recognized the need for an Air Force. Their hot air balloon, the Trinity, has risen up in protest of nuclear disarmament around the world, from Nevada to East Berlin. Hamburg, Germany, 1988. Greenpeace blocks the entrance into port by the nuclear-equipped British ship, the HM Ark Royal. Greenpeace's own inflatable mock nuclear warheads serve as a nuclear deterrent. Because of the proliferation of nuclear weapons based at sea, Greenpeace thinks this is the most probable place for a nuclear war to start. This is where the end could begin. In the Baltic Sea, the Greenpeace ship Moby Dick intercepts the Silny, a Soviet warship armed with nuclear weapons.
This was the first high seas direct action against the nuclear navies. We're in the Baltic. Everything went successfully. We managed to tag the nuclear-capable Kravac class from the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, one of the inflatables became stuck and got sucked under the stern of the vessel. The crew were not injured, but we did manage to tag the vessel with a radiation symbol.
The beautiful blue Mediterranean, renowned throughout the world for its sand and its sun, and now for its toxic sludge. In the summer of 1986, the Greenpeace ship Sirius took a Mediterranean cruise. Some of the sights it saw were appalling. In the Spanish town of Portman, Greenpeace discovered a toxic sludge pipeline. It had already filled the local bay with lead and zinc and was killing a nearby plant and wildlife. Greenpeace volunteers decided to put a stop to this chemical killing. First, they chained themselves to the pipe, and then they plugged it. The pressure from the pipeline was too great to stop it completely. In the end, it was public.
אדם טבע, יום ראשון, 9 בערב, ערוץ 8.
Welcome aboard the pride of the Cunard Line, the magnificent QE2. For a cruise through history, I think you'll find surprising. They say over the years, the QE2's seen everything. Good lookers, millionaires, fancy dresses, con men, French engineers, war, treason, Scottish dancing, and deliverance. Which, funnily enough, is what this show's about. I suppose, to continue the nautical metaphor, the general theme of this particular program is the way, throughout history, people keep on stirring things up. Making waves. What's it going to be today?
Curly.
The permanent wave is just one of the many ways in which the modern woman of today gets to mix and match, image-wise. I mean, all you need is a beauty salon and money, and you too can be different every time you look in the mirror. Thanks to mud packs and seaweed baths and hydrotherapy and collagen and the rest of the 20 billion spent on cosmetics every year, nobody has to look to themselves anymore. And to think, the whole mega business was started in 1904 by a German called Nestler, whose sister hated curlers. Nestler's secret lay in the goo he covered your hair with under these cardboard rollers. Then he plugged you into his infernal electric machine. Well, a set of heaters that would gradually dry out the goo. By 1911, in his fancy London salon, Nestler reckoned he could do the whole job in just 12 minutes. And you came out looking like $1 million. Well, more or less. In a flash of advertising genius, Nestler called these temporary curls a permanent wave. All because of the mystery goo. A godsend for desperate women. Thanks to a godsend, for desperate men. The desperate men in question were California miners who'd run out of pickings and were desperate to find another grubstake. Well, in the 1880s in Death Valley they did, and started hauling out wagon loads of it to the nearest railroad. It was where Nestler's goo would come from, a mineral ore they'd found that you could extract a magic ingredient from called borax. Actually, extract makes it sound harder than it really was, because all you did was crush, boil, filter, boil, crystallize out, and grind. And you got yourself a fine powder you could use for hairdressing, and glass making, plastering, table linen, starch, electric light fittings, pottery glaze, enamel, mouthwash, eye wash, antiseptic, and water softening. You might say with a sense of irony that borax was worth its weight in gold. And speaking of gold, these miners were only in California at all because of something that happened earlier, in the place most people think of when they talk about wealth: Switzerland. I know the Swiss have a bit of a stuffy image, cuckoo clocks, yodeling, you know, but not all Swiss are that dull. One of them dug up half of California. Which is why they found the borax in the first place, thanks to one of the greater con men in the early West. The chap in question also sounds like a real creep. He starts life here as a grocery assistant in Switzerland, then he leaves his wife and 5 kids destitute and sets out for pastures greener, passing himself off variously as a member of the Pope's Swiss Guard, a classmate of the French Emperor, a Swiss Army captain, and a French officer. None of which, of course, he is. Name of Johann Sutter. His greatest scam is when he persuades some people to give him a lot of land so that he can set up a kind of commune, which he names modestly New Switzerland, here outside Sacramento, California. He then buys reject Russian army uniforms with which he dresses his people up to run a trading post he names modestly Sutter's Fort. Then, in 1847, he starts a new money-making venture 50 miles up the American River from his fort. The plan is to sell timber to the settlers coming out west in dribs and drabs, cut and dressed at Sutter's new sawmill. Well, that's the plan. But this is where friend Sutter's life starts to go very slightly haywire. On January the 28th, 1848, evening, Sutter is passing the time fiddling the books or something typical. Outside, it's chucking it down, blinding rainstorm, when suddenly, in through the door rushes the carpenter who's been building Sutter's sawmill for him, and who says, "Pant, pant, psst, holy shamoly, bolt the door, don't breathe a word, top secret, look at this." And he gives Sutter a rag containing a small rock. They look it up in Sutter's encyclopedia, I kid you not. And when they do what it says they should do, they know what the rock is and what to do next. Which is to put Sutter's sawmill here in what is now Coloma, California, firmly on the map, and then to change the course of history for the state of California, the United States, the world, and this program. Because they're about to kick off the 1848 California Gold Rush. It's difficult to exaggerate the gold rush. When the news got out, people literally all over the world started heading for gold country. In the year before gold, 400 settlers had arrived in California. The following year, it was 90,000. This was a great American rags to riches story, and everybody wanted a piece of the action. Meanwhile, the easy pickings had gone to the people who'd got there first. Which they did thanks to something that had been brewing over in England. Because the English had spent the previous 200 years becoming totally addicted to tea time. And the real connoisseur of a good brew, that is any English person, will, for the very best tea leaves, that is, the first crop of the season, sell their grandmother. So, you got the stuff from China to London ahead of anybody else. You could name your price. So the Americans did. Charged double. Why? Well, they've always been go-getters, so they went and got. Of course, the English didn't like that one little bit. Took the wind right out of their sails. Because the Americans pulled the trick with an amazing new ship with more sails than anybody'd ever seen, and a new, low, slimline hull. A ship designed to take a cargo of tea at incredible speed from China, around the Horn, and up the Atlantic to London. A ship known as the Yankee Clipper. In 1851, the fastest ship in the world. Small wonder gold rush people in a hurry took a clipper from New York to San Francisco and got there first. You know, history's full of irony because the reason the American clippers were able to take tea and then anything else to Britain, and I mean legally able, was because the Brits changed their laws. And they did so partly because of something else American. Something that starved over 2 million people to death. It was an American fungus, and in 1845 it arrived in Ireland and destroyed the potato crop, leaving the Irish nothing to eat. Not almost nothing, nothing. There were too many corpses that winter to bury. When the sheer scale of the human tragedy and devastation finally dawned on the British, they changed their very restrictive import laws so as to let American ships bring in extra corn to feed the Irish. But the gesture was too little and too late. The American corn shipments convinced British industrialists that all anti-import laws should be abolished, and they used the latest means available to get that free trade message out to rally all their supporters. It was a simple enough message, because free trade would mean cheaper imports like American corn, and that would mean cheaper bread, and that would mean lower wages, and jobs, and economic expansion, and more money all round. But the major political row created by the potato famine that let the American clippers bring their corn to Britain strengthened the hand of the free trade lobby in Parliament. Although they'd never have got the bill through the House if it hadn't been for some crooked politicians and some rather frank behavior. Thanks to which the free trade lobby would be able to spread the word. The frank behavior involved a number of definitely strange brown paper parcels. Among other things, a dog, a bed, and a housemaid. All sent through the mail free. This was a kind of weird shenanigans a reformer called Rowland Hill exposed in 1836 when he started looking into the murky workings of the British Post Office. It was all to do with fraudulent franking. See, members of Parliament had free franking privileges, and they were using them to mail this kind of stuff to their pals all over the country, losing the government millions in revenue. Not to mention the time wasted by postmen collecting money because you paid to receive a letter, not to send one. And in any case, you couldn't read half of them because you paid by the page, so people wrote up, down, and sideways. What we need, said Hill to the people here in Parliament, is post boxes and a standard postage rate payable in advance with a stamp on an envelope. In 1839, Parliament agreed to this stamp, the penny black. And if you ever see one, grab it because it's worth a fortune today. And once again, thanks to America. That's who did the penny black, a printer from Massachusetts. His main aim in life had been just to make good money. But I mean literally good money, on account of all the bad money floating around. So this American printer solved that problem by making paper money designs so complex it was too difficult to fake. His name was Jacob Perkin, and in 1804, he developed a printing technique that was so good, by 1818 he was over here trying it on the Bank of England. No luck. Then he bumped into Rowland Hill, got the stamp deal, and you know the rest. Well, not quite. Ironically, Perkins' idea for banknotes did catch on in the end, the basic techniques used in every banknote today. You cut a series of patterns, each on a different copper plate. Then you mount each plate on a roller and print one design on top of another on the paper till you've got something like this Indian rupee note, much too complicated to fake easily. And of course I haven't chosen this Indian banknote by accident, because thanks to Perkin and his fancy money, the East is where the story takes us next. But not because of banknotes, as it happens. Unfortunately, stamps and banknotes never made enough money for Perkin, who went off and designed engines for colonial shipping instead. Speaking of which, about 100 years earlier, we colonizers were out here in Southeast Asia trying to buy spices for wool. Not surprisingly, out here in the tropics, the locals preferred cotton. No problem. India grew cotton, and we, well, owned India. So we were sitting pretty, selling loads of hand-painted cottons that soon caught on back in England. And that's where the banknote idea comes in, because in 1752, an Irishman called Nixon came up with a way of making imitation hand-painted cotton, with copper plate printing that would be around for Perkin to use later on. Same idea, really, except with cotton, you pass the cloth through 4 sets of rollers, each one of which puts on a different bit of the pattern. And the name of that pattern? It's the Indian word for brightly coloured. Chintz. By 1790, there wasn't a house in America or Europe that wasn't draping this printed chintz everywhere. That's when matching curtains and covers and all that began. The brighter the colours, the better. And that was just it. Look how crisp and clear and separate the colours are, even where they overlap. This was the first time they were able to print a complicated mix of patterns with colour paste that wouldn't come off the printing plate, or spread out, or run when you washed the material. All thanks to a new colour thickening agent. Well, thanks really to a worm-ridden heap of junk known back then as the French Navy. See, mid-17th century they were down to 22 ships and every one of them full of holes. And then this guy called Colbert takes over, decides to get a total grip on the country and turn it into an economic superpower. Colbert commissions new fortresses all round France, builds a new navy, and offers tax breaks to anybody who'll go looking for foreign trade. One lot of which whizzes down Africa to Senegal and starts sending back everything from slaves to tobacco to sugarcane, and a lot of this, gum from Senegal trees, which the cotton printers would use as a thickener in their colour paste. Remember? But Colbert would have felt really fulfilled if he could have seen all this garbage, sorry, tourist income that one of his economic recovery ideas helped to generate to improve transportation. This, the Canal du Midi. The Canal du Midi today is just what it looks like. But back then, it was the hottest thing that had ever happened to transportation. Went from Bordeaux on the Atlantic to Marseille on the Mediterranean. So you didn't have to sail around Spain anymore. In 1681, it was the model for every canal that followed it. One of the engineers who designed the canal was a fellow called Vauban, and he became a very big wheel, Marshal of France. Designed this bridge, as a matter of fact, to carry the canal over a river. Vauban's second greatest claim to fame was building all those French border fortresses I mentioned. His first claim to fame was inventing a new way of using trenches to dig your way close enough to a fortress walls to blow it up, about which we Brits could have cared less. Until certain rebels tried the technique on us at the Siege of Yorktown during that unfortunate matter Americans insist on calling the War of Independence, which we lost and all went home. Well, not quite all. There was one bunch of people, 100,000 of them, who stayed on until the Americans started hanging them. I mean, of course, all the American loyalists. The 1 in 5 of the population who'd supported the British and who would now suffer for having backed the wrong side. As far as the Americans were concerned, they were all traitors. And a certain Judge Lynch strung them up so fast, he gave the English language a new word. So, by about 1789, most of the ones left lit out for a new life in a new country with another bunch of unfortunates who had also lost everything. Here, in Scotland. This was the time of the clearances, the fancy name for the eviction and starvation and brutality and death happening in the Scottish Highlands as the people were forced out to make way for money-making sheep. And once the absentee landlords, many of whom lived in London, had got rid of their inconvenient tenants, a new genteel Scotland was born with bagpipes and fake tartans and Celtic revival poetry and baronial halls. A kind of 19th century Disney version of the Highlands. This image of Scotland we all have today was invented by the Victorians. These ancient Highland games only started in 1832, and Scottish dancing is really half French. Even the short kilt was designed by an English industrialist to stop the long ones Scottish factory workers usually wore getting caught in the machinery. Meanwhile, the real Highlanders were long gone, across the sea to join those American loyalists in a new Scotland called Nova Scotia. By the early 19th century, thousands of them were arriving in any ship they could get passage on. A fact not unnoticed by one particular ex-loyalist from Philadelphia. His name was Abraham Kunders, and he had, quote, lost, unquote, a small merchant fleet he'd operated down there till the time of independence and his hasty departure.
Good evening. Mrs. Newby and Mr. Burke. Nice to meet you, Captain.
Yeah. Captain. So he started again. In Halifax, Nova Scotia. Did remarkably well.
See you.
Good evening, welcome. By 1833, his son Samuel Kunders had a small fleet and was running the first regular transatlantic passenger line once he got the contract to carry the British Royal Mail, which was going to be a real money-maker because of the penny post, remember? So the company never looked back. And if you're wondering why I got the name wrong, I didn't. At some point in Macunda's life in America, some official made a misprint and changed the family name to Cunard. Well, that's it. I hope this one hasn't left you all at sea.
צלמים בטבע, יום חמישי, 9:30 בערב, ערוץ 18. (1995's ABA, or American Booksellers Association trade show, was truly one for the books. Sprawling across nearly 10,000 meters of exhibit space in Chicago's massive multi-level McCormick Place Convention Center, this year's ABA convention was twice the size of 1994's show and is now considered the largest English-language publishing event in the world. First Lady Hillary Clinton, who is currently writing a book of her own, was on hand to address the gathering.
I've never done anything like this before, never written a book before. I've read a lot and am so grateful for what all of you do every day in making books available and providing the opportunity for people to adventure far beyond their own lives.
The ABA convention is, in one sense, a festival for people who revel in what they do for a living. But there is business to take care of as well. The 45,000 booksellers, publishers, agents, and others who come here want to see what books will be available in the coming season, to negotiate sales and purchases, and to keep up with the latest trends in the bookselling industry, including one which could have revolutionary consequences: the explosive growth of multimedia products.
If you look around ABA right now, you'll see a lot of multimedia vendors that have their own booth. You didn't see very much of all of that last year, and in the previous years, you didn't see it at all.
Christy Homrick is marketing manager for the Ingram Book Company, the largest book distributor in the United States.
We have 16 of our multimedia publishers that you can see behind me that are demonstrating their hottest titles, which is great.
Karen Orton Katz of Star Press was showcasing a multimedia product called Material World.
It's a global family portrait of 30 statistically average families from around the world, from as diverse places as Albania, Iceland, Mali.
Who are they? Where do they live? How do they work and play? What do they eat and drink and think and dream?
And it gives you different ways to experience it than you would through a book.
Some multimedia products seem more like video games than books, and not all booksellers are convinced these items belong in bookstores. Adam Brent sells books in Chicago.
Our customer base doesn't come in looking for that, and so we have chosen not to offer it.
Others are betting that multimedia will be a vital component of bookselling in the years ahead.
Bookstores, this is their, bread and butter, so they really love this kind of product, and already quite a few bookstores, in fact, 1,200 in the U.S., are now selling CD-ROM products.
And even those that don't carry multimedia products are keeping an eye on their sales.
From a business standpoint, you always want to be able to be as profitable as possible. And if you make a decision to exclude multimedia, then those people that use multimedia as well as read books may not come to your store and instead choose another store that carries both products.
While the level of consumer demand for multimedia products is yet to be determined, these conventioneers can take comfort in the fact that their primary product, books, are selling better than ever before.
מלחמה באוויר, סדרה חדשה בערוץ 8. מלחמה באוויר, יום שלישי, 10 בערב, ערוץ 8.
Probably nothing means summer more than California. So we're going to start this issue off right here on the Monterey Peninsula, where we found California divers to be among the world's hardiest.
And the California shoreline offers a bounty of undersea adventures.
Took me 4 minutes to get in my suit. If you're a warm water diver, dealing with the cold water, lower visibility, additional weight, and kelp can require a little practice. Al and Lori Welga of Aquarius Dive Shop in Monterey provide a full-service dive shop with all kinds of instruction and rentals. They frequently lead trips to a popular dive site off Point Lobos, the marine reserve just south of the town of Monterey.
One place to dive here is Whalers Cove, where only a limited number of divers are allowed on any day. There's convenient parking, and you can walk right into the water.
So what's the best technique for getting in here? I like to go to this side.
Once you dive into the kelp forest, a whole new world awaits. Although it may make you nervous at first, kelp can be an aid to divers. The direction the kelp moves can tell you which way the current is flowing. To be safe, always ascend with a reserve of air so that you can find a clear opening to the surface.
From the holdfast of the plant on the rocks, the kelp stalks reach 20, 30, sometimes even 100 feet high, growing faster than 10 inches a day. The canopy can be so thick it creates an eerie half-light, or even a darkness close to night diving. Yet, in some places, the sun shines through in dramatic rays. These giant forests shelter their own community of life. Look for turban snail and kelp crabs climbing up the blades. Fish like golden senoritas and kelp perch cruise around the fronds. You'll find all kinds of stars and crabs.
Nibble on the prawns. Then the sea stars and rockfishes eat the nibblers. Sea cucumbers clean up the remains on the floor. Near the bottom, seaweed grows like a line of shrubs, and red algae provides a carpet, a hiding place for more crabs and kelp fishes. The kelp forest is constantly changing with the season, the tides, and the currents. Yet in the aquarium or the bay, it remains a community that provides a rich harvest.
Dave, why an aquarium with just Monterey Bay marine life? What's unique about the marine environment here?
Well, I think it's probably a very rich area. Being adjacent to the submarine canyon here, they get upwelling of nutrient-rich water, which leads to very rich plankton blooms, which in turn leads to all the animals that in the food chain following that. So there's both a very rich abundance and also a high diversity of marine life. So.
Perhaps the most dramatic of the residents of the bay are the open water dwellers that feed on the plankton, or the fish that eat the smaller creatures that eat the plankton. In the aquarium, the blue water animals are represented by the Monterey Bay tank, with its collection of every kind of shark that lives in the area. The 7-gill sharks and spiny dogfish in this tank never stop swimming, since they need water streaming past their gills to breathe. Scientists found that sharks swimming in circular tanks expend too much energy navigating the turns, so the aquarium built an hourglass-shaped design with turnarounds at each end. Now the 90-foot straightaway gives the sharks a long path to breathe and to rest in.
Out in the open ocean of the bay, we see a whole pod of dolphins from our dive boat, the Cypress Sea. Whales and dolphins are common sights here, an extra bonus for divers. Underwater, other blue water dwellers thrive in the bay. Perhaps the most curious are the squid that jet through the open sea. Their arms steer as they dash up and down, searching for prey. Each squid trails 10 arms. 2 of them are lethal. These they use to fire out and wrap around fishes. The squid school in immense numbers around the bay in the spring, early summer, and fall. Yet they have to stop their darting to mate and lay eggs on the sandy floor in bizarre masses. At 60 to 90 feet, the walls are covered with anemones, cup corals, sponges, stars, and graceful white metridiums. The elegant metridiums thrive in the nutrient-rich waters of the bay. So do other anemones, like these Pachyserianthus that color the rocky slopes and sprout from sandy bottoms between the reefs. Other curious bottom dwellers patrol these far from barren plains.
The Monterey Peninsula offers a variety of accommodation options for divers. Nearby Pebble Beach is a bastion of luxury resorts, graceful mansions, and world-class golf courses. Many San Francisco Bay Area residents seem to favor bringing their own sleeping quarters. They park campers or mobile homes right near the beach. For those who prefer a hotel, one of the most popular is the Monterey Bay Inn. Located right over a dive site on the beach, this well-decorated and roomy inn provides individual terraces and continental breakfast. In addition, showers and dive lockers are handy on the bottom level. But one of the best features of this first-class inn remains the mesmerizing views of the bay from one of the 2 hot tubs.
What would California be without hot tubs? I don't know. It's a great way to wind up a day sightseeing in Monterey, to just sit here and soak up the views of the bay. It ain't bad.
The Monterey Peninsula provides great variety for the diver. Every square inch of the bay seems to reveal new treasures of ocean life. Yet the novice to California diving should know that the diving here, while spectacular, can vary. Visibility ranges from 5 feet to 50, although on rare days it can exceed 100. And the diving can change completely from one day to the next. Generally, the fall and winter months, when plankton growth is the lowest, provide the best visibility.
The water temperature also, while always requiring a good quarter-inch wetsuit, varies from 50 to 56 degrees on the surface, down to as low as 45 degrees due to the deep water upwellings. Especially in winter, dry suits have become popular for local sport divers. The climate around the bay is temperate and doesn't vary that much with the seasons, but be sure to bring a sweater for the evening in the boat and some kind of rain protection, no matter what time of the year.
Then, too, the currents, surf, and kelp can be tricky for the novice California diver.
we strongly recommend that you be accompanied by a local instructor or dive master on your first few California dives, even if you're an experienced Caribbean diver. Yet for the experienced California diver, or the novice with a local guide, the extra time and thermal protection are worth it. If you're a diver jaded by tropical reefs, exploring a rich kelp forest or the rocky shores of Monterey is like jumping into the oceans of another planet. Here you'll once again discover the pleasures most divers seek. That sense of awe of the creatures of the sea and oneness with the living earth itself.
I'm sure almost every diver has encountered